The first letter came on a Tuesday. A stiff white envelope with our HOA's ridiculous golden emblem on the corner like they were some kind of royal court instead of a group of bored retirees with control issues. I ripped it open while standing in my kitchen, coffee still in hand. Dear Mr. Lyle Forester, due to a recent reassessment of community maintenance needs, your monthly HOA dues have been increased to $1,200, effective immediately. Failure to comply within 10 days will result in legal action. I blinked at the number, double what I'd been paying. No warning, no meeting, just a threat signed, as always, by the HOA president, Tricia Vanwell. Mid-50s, the kind of woman who wore pearl earrings to mow her lawn and treated the HOA charter like divine scripture. I called her the same day. Tricia, I just got this letter. If it's about the fee adjustment, she cut me off. It's already been voted on by the board. What board? There hasn't been a meeting in months. There was a private session. Emergency circumstances. You'll find it in the bylaws. Subsection 23, paragraph 9. You're making this up. I don't appreciate your tone, Mr. Forester. If you'd like to avoid penalties, I suggest paying promptly. Then she hung up. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who explodes over stuff like this. I'm a structural engineer by trade, patient by nature, precise by habit. But I wasn't about to get strong-armed by a woman who once fined my neighbor for having 2 festive Halloween decorations. I started digging. Turns out, Tricia and her 2 cronies, Dennis and Marla, both HOA board members, had voted on the increase during a private meeting at the HOA office, which was actually just a rented space above a shuttered dry cleaner downtown. I drove over one afternoon out of curiosity. The door was locked. A handwritten sign read, HOA office by appointment only, and just beneath it, taped loosely to a window, was a for sale sign. I took a photo. Then I called the number. The property was bank-owned. Apparently, the HOA had been leasing the space month to month, and the bank was unloading it for quick cash. I met the agent the next morning, wrote a check for the deposit by noon, and closed on it 4 days later. By Friday, I had the keys. It took everything in me not to laugh when I changed the locks. I even left their dusty filing cabinet in the corner, just for the irony. On Monday morning, I called Tricia. Lyle. What now? I just wanted to let you know I've been reviewing the HOA's lease agreement with the office on Pine Street. What about it? She snapped. It's expired, and the property's been sold. Her voice paused. To who? To me. She didn't respond for a full 10 seconds. When she did, she sounded like she'd swallowed a pine cone. You're joking. Nope, I'm turning it into my private lounge, already picked out the recliner. You can't do that. I legally own the building. You'll need to find a new space, or maybe. Hold your secret meetings in someone's garage. She started ranting about lawsuits and ethics and conflict of interest. But I hung up somewhere between gross abuse of power and I'll have you removed from the HOA. Thing is, I knew something she didn't. The HOA had been skimming funds. I'd seen the ledgers in that dusty cabinet already. And I wasn't done yet. By the time the new leather furniture was delivered, I'd already converted the back room into a workspace complete with a mini fridge, espresso machine, and a framed copy of the deed hanging above the desk. I didn't bother removing the old HOA signage from the door. I wanted any board member who dared show up to knock and see the place for what it was now mine. The first unexpected visitor came Wednesday morning. I was reviewing some of the HOA's account ledgers from a stash of folders left behind when someone pounded on the glass. Dennis. Tall, always underdressed, with that permanent look of fake authority people use when they've never had any real power. He cupped his hands against the glass, peering in until he spotted me sitting by the window. You need to open this door right now, he barked as I stood and turned the lock. Didn't realize appointments had started again, I said, stepping aside. Come in, but wipe your shoes. I've just had the floor cleaned. You can't just take this place. Sure I can. Got the bill of sale right here. Want a copy? He looked around like he expected the furniture to disappear if he stared long enough. You don't understand the ramifications of this. You've interfered with an official entity. Then maybe that entity should have paid its rent. He broke eye contact, jaw tightening. We need the files in the back. There are sensitive documents, funny, Because I was just reading one labeled Maintenance Adjustments, fiscal year prior. You know, the one listing a $10,000 expense for irrigation consultation that doesn't seem to have any contractor attached. He stopped mid-step. I also liked the community wellness program that billed $5,000 for consulting services to someone named LM Holdings. At first I thought that must be a vendor. Then I traced the LLC. Guess whose name's on the registration? He didn't answer. I pulled open a folder and slid it across the desk. Nice try hiding the shell company, Dennis. You don't know what you're talking about. You're right, I said. I'm just a structural engineer who knows how to read invoices, tax records, and cross-reference INs. You, on the other hand, are about to need a very good lawyer. He stared at the folder, visibly sweating now. I'm going to give you some advice, I continued. You and your little trio should start preparing statements, because this isn't just mismanagement, it's wire fraud. And if I found it this easily, imagine what a forensic accountant's going to dig up. He turned and left without saying another word. I didn't waste time. That evening, I drove to the county records office and filed a formal complaint with the Department of Community Governance. Then I contacted a friend from college, Margot, now a state investigator specializing in HOA compliance enforcement. She agreed to look over the documents. 2 days later, she called back. Lyle, she said, this is bigger than you think. There are at least 9 instances of falsified expenses. And that's just from the last 2 years. I figured. These people have been rerouting funds into dummy accounts and claiming reimbursements for non-existent projects. I'm elevating this to the DA's office. That Friday, I hosted a community coffee hour at my new lounge. I printed flyers and hand-delivered them to every house in the neighborhood. No mention of the HOA, just an invitation for neighbors to stop by, ask questions, and see the space. By 10, the room was full. Retired couples, young families, even a few renters who'd just moved in. I stood by the kitchenette pouring coffee and answering questions until one woman, Erica, a nurse who lived 3 doors down, spoke up. Is it true you bought this place just to spite the HOA? No, I said. I bought it because I don't like being extorted. But I stayed because I found something much worse. I gestured to the folders stacked neatly on the table. These are copies of financial documents the HOA left behind. What they show is years of fabricated expenses, unapproved spending, and payments made to fake vendors. Your dues didn't go to maintenance. They went to the board's personal pockets. A man in the back, Greg, who ran a local auto shop, crossed his arms. You saying they stole from us, not saying it. Proving it? I passed around copies of the most egregious documents, highlighting the ones where the same 3 names kept appearing under different company aliases. Murmurs rippled through the room. Then someone knocked on the glass again. This time, it was Tricia. She wore a lavender blouse and a forced expression of calm, like a mask stretched too tight. When she saw the crowd behind me, her posture stiffened. I'd like a word, she said. I opened the door but didn't move aside. You're looking at a community gathering. You're welcome to join. I need to speak with you in private. Anything you say to me, you can say in front of them. She hesitated, then stepped back. You've violated confidentiality. Those documents are property of the HOA. Incorrect. They were abandoned in a space I now legally own. You left them, I reviewed them, and then I turned them over to a state investigator. Her face paled slightly, but she recovered. This is a witch hunt. No, I said. This is accountability. From behind me, someone clapped. Then another joined. Within seconds, nearly the entire room was applauding. Tricia's jaw moved like she wanted to say something else, but she turned and walked away, heels clicking like a retreating metronome. That night, Margot called again. We served subpoenas today. We've frozen the HOA's operating accounts. Formal charges are being drafted. Will the neighborhood get restitution? We're working on it. But with everything you've uncovered, they might be forced to dissolve the HOA entirely. The board's legal exposure is significant. I didn't celebrate, not yet. There were still steps to go. But the next day, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up to Marla's house, then another to Dennis's. Tricia wasn't home when they arrived, but they left a notice on her door, report to the district office or face a bench warrant. By the following week, the neighborhood was buzzing. A group of residents led by Erica and Greg started organizing a petition to formally vote out the remaining board members and request a judicial review of the community's HOA charter. I helped draft a proposal to replace the current management structure with a rotating volunteer council with open books and mandatory oversight. For the first time in years, people were smiling at each other on the sidewalks. Kids played in front yards without being scolded for excessive noise. Someone even put up a wind chime. No one took it down. As for me, I kept the lounge open. Every Saturday morning, neighbors dropped by for coffee, chess, or just to chat. The place became more than a symbol. It was ours now. And the best part? That golden emblem on the glass door, the one the HOA used to stamp on every notice, they had no idea it was technically copyrighted improperly. I filed for a trademark under my name. They'd have to ask my permission to use it again. The following Tuesday, just as I was tightening the last bolt on a wall-mounted dartboard in the lounge, a black SUV with government plates pulled up across the street. Two men in plain suits stepped out, one carrying a leather satchel, the other a clipboard thick with documents. They didn't hesitate. They walked straight up to the door and knocked with the kind of confidence that let you know they weren't selling anything and weren't about to be turned away. I opened the door. "You're either here for the espresso or the evidence." The one with the satchel offered a card. "Special Agent Rowan, State Attorney's Office. This is Investigator Delane. We're following up on the HOA financial disclosure you submitted." "Come on in," I said, gesturing to the seating area. "You'll want the files labeled Q3 anomalies. They're in the cabinet under the coffee machine." They spent the next hour reviewing documents, occasionally stopping to ask specific questions: dates, signatures, vendor addresses. I answered what I could, but most of their time was spent taking photographs and cross-referencing items against a spreadsheet Delane had pulled up on his tablet. At one point, Rowan paused. "Did you notice these 2 payments to a landscaping company in Clearwater?" I saw the names didn't match any business licenses, but I didn't make the connection. They don't exist. Not only that, the address listed belongs to a bait shop that burned down last year. Someone got lazy and used a fake invoice twice. Same amount, 3 days apart. So they weren't even trying to cover their tracks anymore. Looks that way. Rowan leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the ceiling like he was doing math in his head. "We've got enough to validate mail fraud, wire fraud, and likely embezzlement. But here's the kicker: this LM Holdings account you flagged, we traced it through a bank in Nevada. From there, it funneled funds to a private trust in Belize. International laundering, not sophisticated, but yes. And it puts them in a whole new category of liability." They packed up shortly after, leaving me with a formal receipt for the documents and a warning to stay alert. That evening, I heard from Erica. She'd just gotten off the phone with a former HOA treasurer who'd resigned last year under health reasons. "Her name's June," Erica told me. "She says she tried to blow the whistle last summer. Tricia told her if she didn't keep quiet, they'd find something in her tax records. Did she keep any documentation? She says she has emails, meeting notes, and a thumb drive. She's willing to talk if we meet her somewhere neutral." 2 days later, we met June at a diner just outside city limits. She wore oversized sunglasses and a scarf like someone in witness protection, but her voice was clear and sharp. "I was supposed to be the finance chair, but I got shut out of the books within 6 months. Tricia said I was too by the letter. Dennis started handling all the transactions after that." "What about the board votes on financial changes?" I asked. "They fudged them." "They'd hold closed-door meetings and then backdate the minutes. I refused to sign off on the Q2 budget last year. That's when they told me I was too sick to continue." She slid the thumb drive across the table. "Everything's on there. Original budgets, proposed changes, and the real expenditures." "I made copies before they locked me out." I nodded. "You did the right thing." "I just want this over with," she said. "They made me feel like I was losing my mind." Back at the lounge, I plugged in the thumb drive. Files loaded, instantly scanned PDFs, spreadsheets, even audio clips. One of them caught my eye first, a recording labeled Board Budget Meeting 6.14. I clicked play. Tricia's voice came through, tight and irritated. I don't care what the actual numbers are, Dennis. We need to move at least 25 this quarter or we won't make the trust minimum. Dennis, we've already padded the landscaping and the signage upgrades. We can't just invent another project. Tricia, then bill a new one, say it's sidewalk leveling. No one checks sidewalks. Marla, we could issue a special assessment, emergency drainage, blame it on the city. Tricia, perfect, draft it tonight, we'll vote on it tomorrow, just us three. I stopped the recording. My stomach turned. This wasn't incompetence, this was conspiracy. The next morning, I emailed the file to Rowan. Within hours, he responded with a formal notice. The state attorney's office would be filing criminal conspiracy charges, adding them to the list already building. He asked if I would be willing to testify when the case moved to preliminary hearings. I agreed. Word spread fast. The neighborhood's group chat, once a sleepy thread of lost dogs and yard sale flyers, lit up with screenshots and questions. Erica held an emergency community meeting on her front lawn. Over 50 people showed up. That night, the neighborhood voted unanimously to suspend all HOA operations pending legal review. 3 days later, law enforcement served warrants at the homes of Tricia, Dennis, and Marla. They were taken in without incident. News vans showed up before the hour was over. By the 6 o'clock segment, our subdivision's name was plastered across every local station with headlines like HOA fraud scandal unfolds in quiet suburb, and community leader indicted for embezzlement and conspiracy. I watched from the lounge with Greg and a few others, sipping iced tea as Tricia's mugshot flashed across the screen. She always looked like she was auditioning for a perfume commercial, Greg muttered. Now she looks like she got hit by a stack of subpoenas. The next morning, I received a certified envelope from the state attorney's office. Inside was a formal notice confirming that the court had ordered a temporary freeze on all HOA assets, pending criminal trial, and that a court-appointed financial trustee would be reviewing the books. But tucked beneath that was something else, a letter of commendation. Apparently, I wasn't the first person to report HOA corruption in the state, but I was the first to provide full documentation, recordings, and a witness willing to testify. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. The lounge stayed open. More than ever, it had become the heart of the neighborhood. We started holding open forums every other Sunday, talking about everything from traffic patterns to holiday lights. Nothing binding, just neighbors deciding things together, the way it should have been all along. With the HOA power vacuum, the county stepped in and offered to help the neighborhood draft a new charter, one that required full transparency, rotating leadership, and quarterly reviews open to every resident. A group of us volunteered to be on the drafting committee. June even agreed to help, her confidence slowly returning. As we worked, I found myself grateful for every stubborn instinct I'd followed. Because if I hadn't questioned that first letter, if I'd just paid the increase and gone on with my life, none of this would have come to light. None of Tricia's web would have unraveled, and now we had something better than revenge. We had truth. We had unity, and we had a lounge with excellent coffee, a dartboard, and a laminated sign on the door that read former HOA headquarters, current community lounge. No secret meetings allowed. A week after the arrests, things started to shift in ways no one could have predicted. The neighborhood, once a patchwork of isolation and quiet resentment, had begun to breathe like a single organism. Yards that had once been under constant threat of vague violations now bloomed with character, colorful porch flags, whimsical garden statues, and even a few hand-painted fences. The kind of harmless individuality that the old regime had tried to strangle. But beneath the surface, there was still one loose thread left to pull. Agent Rowan called me on a rainy Thursday morning. His tone was clipped and urgent. We need to meet. There's more. I set the lounge to closed, locked up, and drove to the county office building. Rowan met me in a small conference room with no windows and a single fluorescent light that buzzed like it was chewing on tinfoil. He didn't waste time. We subpoenaed a secondary bank account linked to the HOA's reserve fund. It wasn't disclosed in any of the reports you submitted, which isn't surprising. It was hidden behind a charitable foundation based out of Maryland. I leaned forward. Let me guess. That foundation never actually operated. Correct, it was a shell, but here's the kicker. Funds from that account, about $38,000, were wired to a campaign committee for a city council candidate. Name ring a bell, I thought for a moment. Andrew Kessler. He's running for the zoning board seat next month. Rowan nodded. Turns out Kessler was planning to push a reclassification of several residential zones along the western edge of your neighborhood. If the HOA maintained influence, they could have sold off communal green space at a premium. And none of us had any idea. They were laying groundwork. Slow and quiet, but when you bought that office, it forced them to scramble. The accelerated dues increase. That wasn't to cover maintenance. It was to plug holes and keep the illusion alive while they tried to finalize the zoning deal. I sat back, absorbing it. So the board wasn't just stealing. They were trying to flip public land, essentially. And if they'd gotten away with it, your neighborhood would have been split by a commercial corridor within a year. I exhaled slowly. You're going after Kessler too, we already have. He's been named as an unindicted co-conspirator for now, but that may change. We've also frozen the campaign's funds pending a forensic audit. When I got home, I typed up everything Rowan had shared, no editorializing, just facts, and posted it to the community board we'd set up after the old HOA site was shut down. The response was immediate. People were furious, not just at the corruption, but at how close it had come to gutting the place they called home. That weekend, over 70 residents gathered in the park near the east entrance. Greg brought a portable speaker, and Erica read out a draft resolution to permanently dissolve the HOA under state supervision and replace it with a resident-led neighborhood council. There was no vote needed. The cheers said enough. 3 days later, a court-appointed trustee arrived at the lounge to begin the final audit. She introduced herself as Camille Boyd, a quiet woman with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel. She reviewed the remaining documents with the precision of a surgeon, cross-checked everything June had provided, and spent half a day tracing the last of the HOA's offshore transfers. By the end of the week, she issued a formal report. The HOA was officially insolvent. What remained of its assets, roughly $11,000 in untouched emergency funds, would be reassigned to a community improvement trust under the new council's direction. Any remaining debts or obligations would be handled by the court system and not passed on to residents. The reaction in the neighborhood was almost celebratory. Kids chalked messages on the sidewalks, "No more HOA," and "Freedom Garden coming soon." The empty lot where the HOA once threatened to build a compliance enforcement kiosk was now being used for weekend movie nights. Someone set up a projector and strung up a sheet between two trees. I spent most evenings at the lounge, now officially renamed Founders Hall after a suggestion from June. I'd installed a corkboard near the door plastered with thank you notes, copies of the court notices, and even a photo of Tricia at her arraignment, blown up and captioned, "Mistook power for permission." One afternoon, while I was sorting through a box of old HOA newsletters, Erica walked in carrying a stack of petitions. "You know the green belt behind the old tennis courts?" she asked, "near the creek?" "Yeah, turns out it's technically owned by the city, but they never developed it because of an old agreement with the HOA. Now that the HOA is gone, the city's willing to let us turn it into a community garden." I glanced at the forms, all signed. "I'll help with the first build," I said. She smiled. "You've done enough, but we'll save you a plot." That night, I lit the fireplace in the lounge for the first time. The room was quiet, just the crackle of wood and the hum of the old floor heater kicking on. I sat in the high back chair by the window, the one I'd chosen the day I bought the place, and stared out at the street. Trucks passed. Porch lights flipped on. Somewhere down the block, someone was playing a saxophone. Badly, but with enthusiasm. I thought about how close we'd come to losing everything that made the place feel like home, not from a natural disaster, not from some outside threat, but from 3 people who thought no one would notice if they rewrote the rules in small print. But we had noticed, we had acted, and we'd won. The next morning, I received a letter from the district attorney's office. Tricia, Dennis, and Marla had all taken plea deals. In exchange for reduced sentences, They'd agreed to full restitution, public apologies, and permanent bans from holding any future leadership roles in residential governance anywhere in the state. I posted copies of the letters on the corkboard. Greg came by later that afternoon with a six-pack and a new dartboard. We replaced the old one, which had become a bit warped from overuse, and played a few rounds. "You know," he said, tossing a dart, "if you ever decide to run for city council, I'm voting twice." "Don't tempt me," I said. "I've had enough politics for one lifetime," he laughed, then pointed to the framed deed on the wall. "You think they ever imagined this place would end up like this?" "No," I said, "but that's how it always goes. People like them build fences. People like us build doors." Just before sunset, I stepped outside to stretch and spotted a group of kids drawing chalk arrows leading from the sidewalk to the lounge. Over the arrows, they'd written, "Good ideas this way." I let them keep drawing. After all, they weren't breaking any rules, not anymore.